Good evening, you're listening to The Truth Tank and I'm your host, The Tank. If this is your first time listening to The Truth Tank, a big welcome. If you're a repeat listener, welcome back. This is the second time recording this episode. I've had some more computer issues. I was 10 minutes into editing the next episode when I did a software update, which in turn fucked my computer. I had to erase everything. Actually, I really don't know what I did, but that's the past. I had to erase everything, and I didn't have the current episode I was working on saved, nor its script or the script for the next episode. So I lost pretty much everything. I also lost a day's worth of work on the Lie of Communism, which is into its third and final part and should be out by the end of the year, hopefully. So this is take 2. Some interesting things have happened in the world since I last recorded. There was one dramatic event that played out in July that's had a pretty big effect on not only the US but the world, and that is the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. And that's what we'll be looking at tonight. If you hear some background noises, that is the sound of my vintage A2 aviator leather jacket that I got today. It is magnificent. It's from the 80s or 90s, made in the USA. It's the classic A2 leather aviator bomber jacket. It's my favourite style of jacket. I've got a couple of them. I've got the Indiana Jones jacket, which is based off of it. I've got another one I got a couple of weeks ago. And I found this beauty on Depop. Brought it last week and it arrived this morning, so I thought I'd try it out while I'm recording. Fits like a glove, which is always a big gamble when you buy online, especially vintage stuff. It's a size smaller than I usually buy, so it was 50-50 whether it was going to fit or not, but luckily it does. It fits like a glove. It fits like some of my older jackets. Very good quality leather. It's even got a double leather pen holder stitched inside the lining of the jacket, which is pretty cool. Without further ado, this is episode 58 of The Truth Tank, the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump, part 1.
Sharks of the corn? Virus shark? Cocaine shark? Sharktopus? Yeah, those are all real movies. Join me, Steve Coates, as each week I take a comedic look at the bizarre world of sharksploitation cinema on Bucket of Chum, the Shark Movie Podcast.
The events of July 13th were unbelievable. It will go down as a moment in history. Turning on the TV that morning, which was the 14th of July my time, it was a Sunday morning, having breakfast, and then a breaking news bulletin flashes across the screen. Assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. It played out live on TV right around the world. Sitting at my kitchen table on a Sunday morning, halfway around the world, I saw these events play out in pretty much real time. It's obviously a bit of a delay, but I saw them play out not too long after they happened, like many of you did, and billions around the world. For better or worse, we witnessed history play out live on 24-hour news. And whether you love or hate Trump, it's unacceptable what happened. It's unbelievable that this type of thing could happen in 2024. This type of thing should be unacceptable, and it should be reserved for the past and not the present. Having said that, I wasn't really surprised. I wasn't really shocked either. I think I was more shocked the day after. Monday morning is when it really kind of sunk in what had happened. While it was playing out, there was an element of disbelief. But like I just said, I wasn't really surprised. I'm kind of surprised someone hasn't tried to do this a while ago. I'm not condoning violence or political violence of any type. While I'm not surprised, it just seems completely unbelievable that someone actually tried to assassinate Donald Trump. There's probably a lot of people around the world that would have liked to, but it still defied belief when it played out on TV. So I like Trump. Yeah, you can call me a Trump supporter. Not like my opinion should matter. I'm not American. Can't vote for him, so I just like the guy. I think he's funny. Is he the best political candidate? No, I don't think he is. I like Trump more as a businessman and entertainment figure. I think he was a good president. He wasn't the worst. He wasn't the best. I mean, there's been far worse and there's been much better. So I like him and I respect people's opinion who don't like him. I understand he's a very polarizing figure and I do get the hate and why people would not like him and have an issue with him. Listen to that leather squeak in all its vintage glory. It's got a nice smell to it, that vintage leather smell. Anyway, back to it. It's hard to believe it's nearly been a month since the assassination attempt and how quickly the world forgets and the news cycle continues to spin. Assassination attempt aside, I think I'm more surprised at the media reaction or lack of reaction and just how quickly it has disappeared from front page news and the first story on the news cycle every morning. It's been about 3 or so weeks at the time of recording and it's already been replaced by something else. And I get it. News, especially news media, is a linear cycle. It has to progress, it has to keep going. And news doesn't sleep, nor does the negative or bad shit happening in the world. But we could get at least a weekly update on what's happening with the investigations. Is anyone responsible? What more do we know about the shooter? I guess if you're in America, you probably see that on a daily basis, but here in the land down under, it's pretty much been forgotten. It gets mentioned occasionally whenever something political is mentioned on the TV, or Trump's at a rally, or something happens, there's a Republican convention, or Camilla says something, or Biden falls down another flight of stairs. It usually gets mentioned, but apart from that, it's pretty much been swept under the rug. It's a sad fact of modern society, how quickly things are forgotten and replaced with the next big story. One thing is for sure, it will go down in history as an iconic moment and one of the defining aspects of the 2024 presidential race. In a historical context, this presidential race will be overshadowed by this negative event. When people from future generations look up what was the 2024 presidential race all about, this will be the big defining moment that first springs to mind. So first things first, let's look at the shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks. Looking at a picture of Mr. Crooks, he doesn't look like much. He looks like a beta incel cuck. But unfortunately, his name is going to be synonymous with the assassination attempt and history. And it's another 3 named presidential shooter. And it's probably no doubt going to become just as iconic as the event in question, unfortunately. When I first saw a picture of him, I couldn't believe that someone like that could muster up the physical stamina to actually carry a gun and climb a ladder at the same time, line up a shot and then try to shoot somebody. He looked pretty feeble. He looked like a dweeb and a nerd. No offense to dweebs or nerds, but he definitely doesn't look like some type of criminal assassin mastermind or someone capable of doing what he did. And this is something I found during my research for the lie of communism. A lot of the people involved in some of the worst crimes committed during the Russian Revolution looked like normal, everyday people. They didn't look like monsters or bad guys we see in Hollywood. They looked like everyday, normal people. It comes as a bit of a shock when you see some of these quote-unquote normal-looking people committing some truly heinous acts. I won't be referring to the shooter's name again. I don't think people like that deserve to have their name remembered throughout history. They should be ascribed to a history book or a Wikipedia page as a solemn single entry. I'll just be referring to him as the shooter from now on. And when you see someone like that who is so incapable of doing what he did, it gives credence and rise to a lot of conspiracy theories. How did this dude do this How did this nerdy looking guy pull this shit off by himself? It didn't look like he could hold a gun, let alone fire one and hit anything, which we'll get into in a moment. So how did he nearly assassinate the former president? It seems completely unbelievable, and if this was a movie, you wouldn't believe it. At least in the 60s with Lee Harvey Oswald, whoever was behind it, CIA, allegedly, shadow government, whoever it was, came up with a half-decent, believable cover story. He was a communist, he went to Russia, he became indoctrinated with Soviet and communist propaganda, came back to the US, was allegedly, might have been working for the Russians or whoever, and pulls off a miracle shot and assassinates the president. There's a lot of holes in that story, and a lot of that story does bring up a lot more questions and answers, but they at least put some effort into it. If there was some group, shadow government, whoever it was, behind this, they didn't do a very good job of covering their tracks or picking someone that was half believable. If this was some far-left lunatic who snapped, it'd be a bit more believable. If they had a picture of some Antifa, insane, woke-looking individual who had some type of history with firearms, or, turning up at demonstrations, protesting, whatever, rioting at college campuses, or had something to do with the riots in Seattle a couple of years ago, or threw bricks at right-wing protesters, whatever Antifa does, it would be a bit more believable, and therefore less questions would need to be asked. Same thing if it was some right-wing skinhead, or some neo-Nazi with a swastika tattooed on his face. All they'd have to do to get people to believe that it was this either far-right extremist or a neo-Nazi would be to quickly show a picture of their mugshot, giving the crazy eyes to the camera, and everyone would believe it. Case closed, not as many questions get asked. And this is why this shooter in particular, there are so many questions around him. Was he just some loner who just snapped? Did he hate the president? Or is he part of some bigger, grandiose conspiracy? That has yet to be revealed. So let's take a look into the background of the shooter. Article time. So I found this article on abc.net.au. Investigators search laptop, phone of Trump shooter TMC, I won't say his name again, in search for motive as more details emerge. It's by Brianna Morris Grant, posted Wednesday 17th of July 2024. FBI technicians are working 24 hours a day to analyse the phone and computer of TMC, as more details about the would-be assassin's motives come to light. Officials have yet to determine the 20-year-old gunman's motive for carrying out the attack on former President Donald Trump at a Pennsylvania rally. The incident injured the Republican presidential candidate, killed a 50-year-old volunteer firefighter, and left 2 others critically injured. Crooks, I didn't technically say his name, but just so this doesn't get too confusing and weird, I'll just say Crooks from now on. Crooks was killed by a Secret Service sniper after firing several shots from a nearby rooftop. Senior FBI officials told America's NBC news technicians at the Bureau's laboratory in Quantico were still forensically analysing Crooks' phone and laptop. The FBI say it had taken a day to unlock the phone without help from an outside firm. Interesting detail to mention. I guess does that mean Apple or Samsung were uncooperative in unlocking the phone? Or does that mean they just didn't bother asking? This is a quote. The investigation is still in the early stages, an FBI statement said. The FBI has conducted nearly 100 interviews of law enforcement personnel, event attendees and other witnesses. That work continues. Yeah, that would be a massive undertaking. It's reminiscent of the Boston Marathon bombings. That Mark Wahlberg movie, Patriots Day, did a really good job highlighting how in-depth and chaotic the investigation after events like this are, how they have to go through every piece of evidence. There's a scene in the movie where they set up in the warehouse, basically both sides of the street and where the businesses would be and where bits of evidence were found and worked out that's where the cameras were. It's incredible. And they did this in a relatively short time frame. Whether you like the feds or not, no one can deny they work their fucking asses off when things like this happen. and they've got to go through hundreds, thousands of witnesses sometimes, go through all that evidence to try and find a lead and try to get some coherent picture of what happened. Crook's a registered Republican. It's a very odd way to show his affection to the Republican Party. He was a member of a shooting club near his home in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, about an hour's drive from the rally in the town of Butler. Now, in my conspiratorial mind, I would say, yeah, that's a good piece of the cover story. Was he actually part of a shooting club? Or did he just like guns and, want to hang around it, but wasn't any good? And that seems to be the case, or at least where some of the evidence is pointing to. Investigators say Crooks visited the shooting club the day before the shooting and practiced firing. Very convenient. When you look at that in context, it does look like he was practicing for the attempt. Yeah, but then again, millions of people go to shooting ranges to hone their skills or just to shoot guns. Shooting guns is fun. There's not always some sinister motive behind it. The following morning, he drove to a Home Depot hardware store and brought a 1.5 meter ladder, and to a gun store where he purchased 50 rounds of ammunition. According to CNN, which cited multiple law enforcement officials, he told his boss he needed the day off on Saturday because he had, quote-unquote, something to do. He reportedly told co-workers he would be back at work on Sunday. We obviously know that didn't go to plan. There's no way anyone who has a shred of common sense could possibly believe that they were going to leave the rally after trying to assassinate the president in either a body bag or handcuffs. In this case, it was the former. That brings up the other question is, didn't anyone see this kid walking around holding a ladder and a rifle? I'm assuming he had a rifle in a bag and was carrying it. And this is what I was saying about cover stories. To some people, they might think, oh, that's a good cover story, it's convenient. Yeah, he brought a ladder and he brought a gun with 50 rounds of ammunition. He was practicing at a firing range a day before. Told his boss he needed the day off, gets the day off, goes to the rally, climbs up a building with the 1.5 meter ladder he brought at Home Depot, gets up there with his gun and his 50 rounds of ammunition and takes some shots at Trump. To me, that brings up a whole set of new questions. 1, the ladder's too short. 2, how the fuck did he get through the thousands, hundreds, thousands, how many ever there was, of Trump supporters and police and law enforcement officials who were presumably on duty, walking around, making sure checkpoints were secure and people weren't driving cars or parking too close, general safety kind of shit. You would think that someone would have seen this dude walking around with a rifle bag and a ladder. If that's the way the quote-unquote cover story is meant to be perceived, that doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. In the article, it has a picture of the rooftop he climbed on, and he could have reached that with a 1.5 meter ladder. It wasn't a very big building, which means more people probably should have seen him, which makes the theory of him carrying a ladder even more ridiculous. Someone didn't see him walking up to a building with a fucking ladder, if that's how it played out. So there's a lot more questions than answers. I know it's only early stages of the investigation, but there's a lot of stuff that isn't adding up. He reportedly told co-workers he'd be back at work on Sunday. Then he drove to the Trump rally. Inside his car, according to investigators, was an improvised explosive device which was linked to a transmitter he had carried with him. Thank God that didn't go off, because that would have been even worse. I'm looking at a picture of this guy while I'm reading this, and this guy doesn't look like he could pull the skin off of a rice pudding or fight his way out of a wet paper bag, let alone build a bomb, shoot a gun, buy a ladder, climb up a fucking building with the gun, 50 rounds of ammunition, and try to assassinate a former president. It just doesn't seem very likely, and a lot of shit just does not add up with this. But as I said before, some of the worst shit in history is being done by the most normal looking people. More details about the device are expected to be released in the coming days. Crooks reportedly arrived about 3 hours before the shooting and raised suspicion with security when he was found carrying a rangefinder, a device used by hunters and target shooters to measure distance. Should have been the first red flag that went up. Why didn't the cops or security, Secret Service, I mean, this is kind of in their wheelhouse, and the local police, why didn't anybody stop him and go, what the fuck are you doing with a rangefinder? If he got there 3 hours before the event, even if he got there 20 hours before the event, there still should have been security in place. I mean, obviously no one checked the buildings, or if they did, they didn't do it thoroughly enough. There was eyewitness reports saying that they saw him on the roof or climbing up onto the roof. They saw him in the prone position with a rangefinder. Told the cops about it, and they didn't really seem to do anything about it. That leads into the rise of conspiracy theories. Why didn't the cops do anything about it? They just didn't take it seriously. Did those specific cops just not like Trump and wanted to see him assassinated? I'm not saying that is a possibility or a reality. Merely throwing out an opinion, a line of questioning, if you will. So it does seem really fucking suspicious when the police don't do a thing to stop a guy they've had multiple reports about lurking about on a rooftop with a rangefinder. I mean, what the fuck was he doing? Was he just, I don't know, range finding for the fun of it? I don't know, was he just fucking bored? Because it seems pretty odd from my perspective that he was on a building in a prone position with a rangefinder, just happened to be next to a gun at a presidential rally. That story raises a lot more questions than answers for me. I'm also surprised no Trump supporters stopped him. I mean, after all, he's walking around looking very suspicious. He's got a rangefinder. I'm surprised he didn't get his head kicked in, or there wasn't a citizen's arrest, but I guess you have to kind of see him in the moment. But the police response is the most concerning. The responsibility falls back onto the Secret Service for their lack of action. This is solely on them. Why didn't they do the proper checks? Why weren't they securing buildings? Why weren't the buildings already secure? Why didn't they have agents on every fucking rooftop and inside every building in that vicinity? That should have been sitting in trees. They should have had drones. There's a lot of things that could have been done better that weren't done at all. Hindsight is 2020. Everything's easy to see in retrospect. But you would think a former president at a rally for the upcoming election would have a tad more security than he did. Why weren't the police and Secret Service talking to each other? Why weren't the Secret Service and police on the same page? Because it seems like they weren't communicating and one didn't know what the other was doing. There was several reports, as I mentioned. This guy was on the roof. He's looking really suspicious. He's got a rangefinder. Why the fuck didn't a couple of cops get up on the roof and go, "Oi, dickhead, what the fuck are you doing? Who said you could come up here? How did you get here? They should have arrested him right then and there and taken him off for questioning." No motive and no accomplices as investigation continues. The motive behind the shooting remains largely a mystery for police. Crooks carried no identification with him, forcing authorities to use his DNA to confirm his identity in the early hours of Sunday morning US time. I'd say they did that pretty quickly. While I was watching it, the shooter's name was released in the first hour or hour and a half, I'm pretty sure. So they must have done that pretty quick, because by about lunchtime, the entire planet knew who the shooter was. If they can come by that info that quickly, why can't they find out other things? Yeah, it's a huge investigation, but apparently it takes less time to get a confirmation on DNA testing than it does to unlock some dweeb's phone and computer. But maybe that's just me taking a very cynical approach to it. He was not under FBI surveillance before the incident. I'd hope not, because the FBI's just dropped a massive fucking ball, haven't they? If he was under surveillance by them and they knew what he was up to, and this played out the way it did, I think the FBI would have a few more questions to answer. After graduating from Bethel Park High School in 2022, Crooks attended a community college and began working as a dietary aide at a nursing home and rehabilitation center. Special Agent Kevin Rojek told media the FBI had, quote, not identified an ideology associated with the subject. And that's what is so interesting and concerning about this. Going back to Lee Harvey Oswald, at least in that case there was something that could tie him to a motive and an ideology. There was the whole communism Russian link, which was then easier to more or less blame him or say, well, he's a communist, he's been overseas, yada yada yada, he's been indoctrinated by an ideology and that's why he did what he did, and he took it out on a president that was very liberal. Crooks, on the other hand, is a different story. Nothing about him his past, the backstory to the assassination attempt makes any fucking sense at all. There's a lot of contradictory factors with him, which doesn't say much if the FBI are having a hard time determining the motive. How's anyone else supposed to? Searches of his online activity have so far not revealed any suspicious activity, instead showing an interest in chess, video games, and learning to code. So he's a computer nerd. Which is funny, because the work are always telling us we have to watch out for quote-unquote toxic masculinity. In this case, it was toxic beta masculinity, if you could call it masculinity at all. This guy is starting to sound like a computer nerd who thought he was an assassin. Despite being a registered Republican, the upcoming election would have been the first time Crooks was old enough to vote. A National Security Council spokesperson said there was no known link between Crooks and any accomplice or co-conspirator, foreign or domestic. Interesting. They know that part, but they don't know how to get into his phone. So how would they know? An all-senators phone briefing is set to be held on Wednesday afternoon US time to discuss the assassination attempt. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's office said the phone briefing would include representatives from the Justice Department, Secret Service, and the FBI. End of article. So who knows what to believe anymore? I've heard so many different theories about this guy. He'd been visited by the FBI apparently, there's tunnels under his house, and a whole bunch of other shit. Who knows what to believe anymore? I don't think we'll ever know the full story, the same way we don't know all the facts about the JFK assassination or the origins of COVID. Unfortunately, it's the world we live in. Secrets are suppressed because the general public is deemed too stupid to know some of these facts. And, in some cases that's true, but it doesn't help the misinformation argument. Who knows what to believe anymore? The less facts and information we have, the more people are just going to make up their own version of events. Those stories get circulated and eventually become truth, which leads to more misinformation. It's easy to see how the conspiracy theories can rise so quickly in these type of events. While I was rewriting the script for this episode, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole trying to find out some more of the conspiratorial stories about this shooter. Couldn't find a lot, to be honest. I've heard a few wild theories about the shooter. Apparently there was a tunnel under his house, and that he was visited by the FBI several times in the days and weeks before the shooting. I'll chalk it up to just an interesting conspiracy theory with not much weight behind it. I did a quick Google search on some of these and I couldn't find much at all. I couldn't find anything about the tunnel system or visits to from the FBI, which doesn't surprise me one bit. I wasn't really expecting to find anything about him being visited by the FBI. I think that's just a conspiracy theory and a good story. I've often wondered how things like this get started. Who thinks of something so over the top, like he was visited by the FBI? And how does that become part of the shooter's background? I mean, it's possible he could have. I've also heard that someone had gone through the house, they'd gone through everything and covered it up pretty well. I don't know how anybody knows any of this stuff or where these theories come from. I'll take them as interesting theories and not much more. What I did find in the Google search, there's a whole bunch of articles. Thomas Matthew Crooks looked up photos of Trump, Biden, and others before attempted assassination, FBI officials tell senators. He's not much of an assassin, or a Republican for that matter, if you didn't know what Trump looked like, or Biden. Donald Trump's shooter posted anti-Semitic and anti-immigration content online, FBI Today News. Pretty sure that's a bullshit fake news story, so I'm not even going to bother looking into that. But one thing I did find over and over again relating to the shooter was alleged anti-Semitic and anti-immigration posts posted to his social media before the assassination attempt. So this comes from dailymail.co.uk. Take it with a grain of salt, it is the Daily Mail after all. This is one of the more credible news sources I found relating to the anti-Semitic posts. It's by John Michael Rashik, he's a political reporter. It was published the 31st of July 2024. FBI discover social media account linked to Trump gunman Thomas Crooks with over 700 posts filled with shocking messages about Jews and migrants. Okay, let's have a look. The FBI revealed they had a social media account possibly tied to Trump's shooter that could shine a light on the motive behind his assassination attempt. So far, very little has been uncovered about Crooks and what led to his shooting of Trump, which injured others and fatally wounded former firefighter Corey Competor on July 13th. I hope I'm saying his name right, and no disrespect to his family if I'm not. The bombshell developments in the investigation into the assassination attempt at Trump's Butler, Pennsylvania rally came during a Senate hearing on Tuesday. Congress dragged in the Secret Service's new acting head Ronald Rowe and the number 2 at the FBI, Deputy Director Paul Abate, I think that's how you pronounce his name, to testify on the shooting. Abate revealed that at least one social media account of an unnamed platform believed to be associated with Crooks was discovered by the feds. The account posted over 700 comments between 2019 and 2020, he added. Some of these comments appear to reflect anti-Semitic and anti-immigration themes to expose political violence, Abate said. Interesting. That's a lot of posts for a year. Well, I don't really post much, so I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I find it interesting that they've only found comments relating to a 1-year period. I thought there would be more spread out, maybe from 2019 to 2023. It seems a bit random that it's a 1-year period. This might be true, but like I've said a few times, you have to call these things into account because you don't know what to believe anymore. On the one hand, it might be true. On the other hand, it might just be another piece of a cover story. However, to me, it does seem a little weird that it's only 1 year. He couldn't confirm the name of the social media platform until after his agents could prove with 100% certainty Crooks made the posts. Abate said the posts were extreme in nature, but that the FBI is still determining whether the account actually belonged to Crooks. How long does it take to find out if he owned the account? And if he didn't own the account, why is the account being tied to him? That might be standard police procedure, but that does smell a little fishy to me. He also disclosed that the agency is still working to identify and infiltrate Crooks' various encrypted accounts that could shine a light on his motives. Interesting. Now we're getting somewhere. That angered Senator Lindsey Graham, who wanted more information on his motive. This is a quote from him. "So you're telling me the guy that took 8 shots at the president, former president, has apps that we can't get into, that may, if you could get into them, reveal some irrelevant information?" "This is correct, Senator," the official responded. This concerned Graham, who later pushed for better methods to infiltrate encrypted accounts. That also brings up the whole online privacy and security issue. The feds went at it with Apple a few years ago over an alleged terrorist. They wanted Apple to open his phone and they wouldn't. They said they wouldn't compromise customer security because if they did it once, they would have to do it for everybody. And that would violate their privacy and their terms and conditions. It's a very interesting issue, which brings up privacy and security, but also national security. "We need a solution that provides lawful access," the official noted. "Inferring current options only provide a legal entry into Crooks' suspected accounts, i.e. they have to hack them." In addition to online account discoveries, the number 2 man at the FBI disclosed more about the timeline behind the assassination attempt. Approximately 25 minutes prior to the shooting, the US Secret Service command post was notified of a suspicious person, Abate testified. So if they had a 25-minute head start, they obviously didn't take it seriously enough to do anything about it. The Secret Service acting director also admitted he had no defense as for why the rooftop where Crooks fired shots toward President Trump was left open. Quote from him, "I went to the roof of the AGR building where the assailant fired shots, and I laid in a prone position to elevate his line of sight. What I saw made me ashamed as a career law enforcement officer and a 25-year veteran with the Secret Service. I cannot defend why that roof was not better secured," he told Congress on Tuesday. At least somebody's taking ownership and responsibility. So far, the previous head of the Secret Service came up with piss-poor excuse after piss-poor excuse to try to get out of it. And none of those excuses were very good. In fact, they were pretty pathetic. One excuse that everyone's heard by now is the sloped roof theory. Was the reason there weren't more snipers on rooftops was because of the sloped roofs, which is complete bullshit because you can clearly see the sniper taking a shot from a fucking sloped roof. And it's Secret Service. If there's a sloped roof in the way, they'll find a way around it, put up a scaffolding, put up a fucking cherry picker, whatever. At least this guy's taking ownership and not trying to make moral piss poor excuses as to why security failed. Crooks fired 8 rounds towards Trump, grazing him with a bullet in his ear. Yeah, I actually didn't know it was 8 bullets. I thought it was less, but there you go. When I laid in that position, I will not understand why there was not better coverage, or at least somebody looking at the roof line when that's where they were posted, Rose said, noting that Crooks's head would have been clearly visible from the unmanned rooftop. We've all seen those photos by now of his head sticking up with the long hair. If people could see him and spot him pretty clearly with a camera phone, how did the cops and nobody else see him? If you could see him from ground level, you could have definitely seen him from the elevated position, so there is absolutely no excuse. If he's clearly visible from the ground level and people could see him and take photos of him and video, why couldn't the cops go up there and stop him? 30 seconds before Crooks fired his shots, local law enforcement had radio to Secret Service warning about a man with a rifle on the roof. Around 3.5 minutes before that, he'd been, quote-unquote, observed on the roof. That makes what I said even more disturbing. They reported him, they phoned it into the Secret Service, and yet they still didn't bother to look in the direction the reports were coming from. No one saw some guy lying on the roof with a rifle. If the cops saw him there, why didn't the cops go up onto the roof and blow his brains out? Police are supposed to protect and serve. In this case, they failed miserably. He was spotted with a rifle on a fucking rooftop, yet nothing is done. Police pass it off to the Secret Service. The Secret Service take their sweet time and wait for the president to get shot before reacting. I don't want to contribute to misinformation or conspiracy theories, and I'm not saying it was a setup, but it looks like a setup. There's going to have to be some pretty good evidence to convince me that this wasn't an inside job and a setup by either the Secret Service or one of the ABC agencies. This probably goes above the heads of local police, but it seems very suspicious they see a guy with a gun on a rooftop and fail to act, or choose not to act in this case. I'm not saying that that's the case, that's just a theory I'm chucking out there. Agree with it or don't. To me, it just seems highly suspicious. Rose said that since the shooting, he'd implemented a number of changes at the Secret Service. I'd fucking hope so. Including having security plans go through multiple supervisors before implementation. Expanded use of drones, good idea. More resources for protective site communications and expeditious approval of requests for personnel at protective sites with heightened security environments. Rowe and Abate spoke to the Judiciary and Homeland Security Committees after their boss, former Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheetle, submitted her resignation last week after a 6-hour-long hearing where Republicans and Democrats accused her of stonewalling. Yeah, and rightfully so. She should have lost her job half an hour after this happened. Her excuses were pathetic and inexcusable. She should have admitted her mistakes and fallen on her side. It shouldn't have taken 6 hours to find out that she royally fucked up at her job. She should have done the noble thing, accepted responsibility, and fallen on her sword. The FBI and Secret Service officials also disclosed a more accurate timeline of events leading up to the shooting. Almost a week before the rally, Crooks scouted the site of the event, spending 20 minutes doing reconnaissance on the location they shared. Just a day before the shooting, Crooks went to a shooting range to practice his shot. The morning of July 13th, Crooks again visited the grounds, the officials said. I'm surprised that he managed to get that close to the site on the morning before Trump was talking. You think that would be crawling with security and police? You think the Secret Service would have a presence there? I mean, look at all the over-the-top security procedures they go through when the president visits somewhere, like the entire hotel gets locked down and the surrounding suburb, and yet this guy manages to scope the site without raising any questions. Seems a bit sus to me. Abate and Rowe also disclosed Crooks' activity on the day of the shooting and what authorities did in response. Local law enforcement marked Crooks as suspicious 90 minutes before he opened fire, the officials shared. And that is just utterly inexcusable. They had an hour and a half where he was identified as suspicious and didn't think to maybe tail him, maybe keep a closer eye on this guy, maybe inform the snipers, the Secret Service snipers, that this guy was on the roof or he was walking around looking sus. Secret Service was informed that the would-be assassin had a rangefinder 30 minutes before the shooting occurred. Once again, inexcusable. They had plenty of time, and yet it comes down to the last second. If Trump hadn't have moved to look at the screen next to him, he would have been killed. That bullet would have hit him in the side of the head and not grazed his ear. And it's not like Trump is a small man either. He's pretty big. And because he is so animated on stage, I think that is the only thing that saved his life. Secret Service was informed that the would-be assassin had a rangefinder. Minutes later, just 20 before the shooting, the Secret Service counter-sniper team was given a photo of the suspicious suspect. And this gets worse and worse and worse. Then 3.5 minutes before Crooks opened fire, he was spotted on the roof. Perfect chance to stop him. The officials also disclosed that Crooks was seen with a gun on the roof 30 seconds before firing the first shot. Doesn't seem like a lot of time, but that's plenty of time to put down a threat. If he was deemed suspicious 20 minutes before he fired the first shot, why didn't the cops or the Secret Service stop him? There was enough personnel there, even if there was some gaps in security. They could have sent an FBI team, the guys who were all camoed up in the military gear, sent a couple of them on the roof, take him into custody. Within 15.5 seconds of the first shot, he's neutralised. Rowe testified about how quickly Crooks was killed after opening fire. So in other words, he had to fire the first shot in order to be that big of a threat. It's like, what was he doing with a rangefinder and a gun on the roof? It just seems really sus to me. But prior to his first shot, Secret Service was unaware of his location. The Secret Service acting chief added, yeah, okay, could have happened. First place you think they would be looking would be the rooftops. And given that the guy could be seen with the naked eye only a few meters away, stands to reason an amateur sniper should have been able to spot him with a naked eye pretty quickly, I'd think. I've never been in that situation, obviously, so I'm just theorizing how close he was. I think he was like just over 100 meters away. Should have been close enough to see him. However, counter to that, he noted that the counter snipers did not see him because he was initially hiding on the other side of the roof. Interesting. Quote, I believe he was obscured by the roof, Rowe testified. This article also includes a breakdown of the timeline. July 7, Crooks travels to rally site to spend 20 minutes doing reconnaissance. July 12th, shooter visits Clarenton Sportsman's Club to practice shooting. July 13, 10 a.m, shooter visits rally site again. 90 minutes before shooting, local law enforcement suspicious of Crooks. 20 minutes before Trump takes stage. 30 minutes before shooting, Secret Service made aware of an individual with the rangefinder. That's the one you got to put the asterisk next to. Well, the whole thing should be able to put an asterisk next to, but that 20 to 30 minutes is the key breakdown in the security that could have cost Trump his life. That 20 to 30 minutes was more than enough time to take out a threat without anybody knowing what was going on. The rally could have continued like planned and no one in the crowd or Trump would have been the wiser. I mean, isn't that the Secret Service's job? So those 20 to 30 minutes are the inexcusable window of time where this situation should have been, for lack of a better word, put down before it escalated to what we saw play out on our TV screens. 3.5 minutes before shooting, Crooks spotted on roof. 30 seconds before shooting, Crooks seen with a gun. Okay. Just another quick article to get some more background on the shooter. This is from the BBC.com. What we know about the Trump attacker, 20th of July 2024. It's by Bernard Debshuman, however you pronounce his name, Tom Bateman and Tom McCarthy. I'll skip over some of the shit we already know. Investigators believe Crooks, armed with an AR-style rifle, opened fire at former president while he was addressing the crowd at Butler, Pennsylvania. A 20-year-old kitchen worker was shot dead at the scene by a Secret Service sniper. This is what we know about him. Who was TMC? Mr. Crooks was from Bethel Park in Pennsylvania, about 70 kilometers 43 miles from the site of the attempted assassination. He graduated in 2022 from Bethel Park High School with a $500 prize for maths and science, according to a local newspaper. See, I told you, he's a nerd. Crooks worked in a local nursing home kitchen where staff members have said that he passed the background check and raised no concerns. He attended the community college at Allegheny, or CCAC, from 2021 to 2024 and graduated with an associate degree in engineering science. In a statement sent to BBC, the college noted that he graduated, quote, with high honours, and that a review of his records turned up no disciplinary issues. State voter records show he was a registered Republican. He also donated $15 to the Liberal campaign group Act Blue in 2021, according to election donation filing and news reports. He had a membership at a local shooting club, the Clareton, I think it's pronounced Clareton Sportsman Club, for at least a year, the club confirmed to the BBC. It has multiple gun ranges, including a high-power rifle facility with targets up to 171 metres away. Quote from the club, obviously the club fully administers the senseless act of violence. Attorney Robert S. Boutte III, who represents the organisation, told the BBC. Law enforcement officials believe the weapon used to shoot Donald Trump, an AR-style rifle, was purchased by Crooks' father. Authorities say that Crooks purchased a box of ammunition containing 50 rounds on the day of the rally, reports CBS and BBC's US news partner. What was his motivation? Police and agencies investigating have been unable to identify his motives, yada yada yada. What kind of person was he? So far, a confusing and at times conflicting picture has emerged of who Crooks was as a person. Speaking to a local news outlet, KDKA, some young locals who went to school with him described him as a loner who was frequently bullied and sometimes wore hunting outfits to school. Another former classmate of his, Summer Barkley, cast him differently, telling the BBC that he was, quote, always getting good grades on tests and was very passionate about history. She described him as well liked by his teachers. Others simply remembered him as quiet. Another classmate who did not want to be identified described him as, quote, intelligent but a little bit weird. Staff at Angelo's Pizza, a restaurant in Bethel Park, told the BBC they were familiar with Crooks. The restaurant's owner, Sarah Petco, said that staff members, some of whom were his classmates, thought he was a loner, but they were having trouble understanding how an otherwise quiet man turned to violence. And this is something that, doing the research for the Lie of Communism, I have seen a few times. Relatively quiet, intelligent people get sucked into some of the most ridiculous and nonsensical ideas and do some incredibly violent and horrific things in the name of what they believe. It's unclear at this stage whether the shooter was influenced by any type of ideology, which makes his actions just even harder to understand. Like I keep saying, it seems so left of field that this guy could do something like this. Another former classmate told ABC News he, quote, shot terrible and wasn't really fit for the rifle team. The school district said there was no record of Crooks trying out for the team, and he, quote, never appeared on a roster. Okay, interesting. So, where does the rifle story come from? Did someone just assume he got kicked off the team because he was crap? Who knows? Jamison Myers, who graduated alongside Crooks in 2022, remembers him as seemingly a quote-unquote normal boy who was not particularly popular but never got picked on. Quote, he was a nice kid who never talked poorly of anyone, and I never have thought him capable of anything I've seen him do in the last few days. Max Smith, who took an American history course with Crooks, told the Philadelphia Inquirer that his former classmate, quote, definitely was conservative. Mr. Smith recalled a mock debate in which they both took part, saying, quote, the majority of the class were on the liberal side, but Tom, no matter what, always stood his ground on the conservative side. Interesting. That article makes the shooter's background and trying to determine a motive even harder. He sounds like a very complicated and mixed up individual. None of those quotes by his former classmates make any coherent sense. They're all contradictory. He's conservative. He always stuck up for the conservative side. He was quiet. He wouldn't harm a fly. He got picked on. He didn't get picked on. He liked history. He sounded like he had a future in science and engineering. But something went terribly wrong along the way. It's interesting. No two parts of this guy's personality or character seem to make any sense or flow with one another. There's no rhyme or reason. It's all very contradictory and very hard to try to get a handle on who this guy was. Was he working on behalf of someone else? Was he brainwashed? Or was he just a fucking lone wolf psycho who just snapped? Who the fuck knows? Any option is plausible with this guy, and we'll never know the truth, I don't think. And in light of the facts we know about him, it makes determining any type of truth that much harder. This is going to add more fuel to the conspiracy theories surrounding this guy. Was he working for the FBI? Was he a lone wolf? Who the fuck knows? Looking at one of those conspiracy theories a little deeper, was this an inside job? Did one of the ABC agencies want Trump gone? I don't think we'll ever know who was behind it. Was it the FBI, CIA, right wing, left wing, far right wing, far left wing, extreme left, extreme right, patriot group, Antifa, deep state, lone wolf, anti-patriot group? You can go on and on and on. The conspiracy theories around this are going to run wild and very deep. Either or, in my opinion, could be an inside job, might not be an inside job. Who the fuck knows? Everyone will have a theory. Everyone's got a theory. All of them are valid and possible and probably pretty plausible as well, until proven otherwise. We will never know who was behind it. Only he knows his motivations and why he did what he did. And asking him why he did what he did is a little hard at this stage, unless you've got a Ouija board or a medium handy. So it's going to be anyone's game determining what actually happened. And we'll just have to hope that the authorities are upfront and honest with the information. But we'll come back to him a little later. In the days after the assassination attempt, there was universal outrage and disgust right around the world, which seems to have gone by the wayside in the weeks following. Both sides condemned what happened as well as most people. There were some that made light of the situation, one of which being Kyle Gass from Tenacious D. Tenacious D was in Australia at the time. They were touring. They've only got 1 or 2 shows into their national tour. It was Kyle Gass's birthday on the Sunday. A cake or something was brought out on stage. He was asked what his birthday wish was, and he said, "Next time, don't miss Trump." So a few days later, Jack Black calls the rest of the tour off. Thankfully, I hadn't brought tickets for it because they had sold out, so a bit disappointing to those who had paid and had wanted to see them. I wouldn't have mind seeing them. It would have been a pretty cool show. Jack Black took a lot of flack for it, even though it wasn't really his fault. The band is now on hiatus, and there are no artistic plans for the immediate future, which is sad, which seems like a bit of an overreaction, but at the same time, this is the world we're living in. The woke machine is obsessed with cancelling people, and Tenacious D just got cancelled for a joke, which is funny because if this was a couple of years ago, they would have got cancelled for COVID or not wanting to get a shot, not wearing a mask or whatever, and now it's making a joke. Yes, it's in poor taste. I didn't particularly find it very funny. I'm not the only one. There was a lot of people who were outraged by it, and didn't even happen in America. This happened on the other side of the world. There was Australian radio hosts that said they would never ever interview Tenacious D or play their music on their station again, and this was disgusting, and they should be banned from the country, which I think is a bit of an overreaction, a bit of an overstep, and one of those stupid things people say in the heat of the moment that gets blown out of proportion, picked up by a news agency, and it's plastered all over clickbait articles on the internet. This spawned further outrage. People were outraged that he got cancelled and they had to cancel the rest of the tour. There seems like there's something else behind it. I don't know whether Jack Black was overreacting or he was really offended by it, but it seems a bit a bit of an overreaction, because I always thought he was a liberal left guy who would have called for people to get cancelled during COVID, which is ironic because now it's his bandmate that got cancelled. You can't have a double standard for Republicans and Democrats. This is an outrageous act perpetrated on a Republican leader. There can't be two separate rules for either party. And with all the woke shit we've seen recently, in recent years, I find it pretty funny that people on the left are getting cancelled by people on the right, even though they were the ones cancelling the right a couple of years ago. I swear we slipped into a fucking alternative reality years ago, because this is like a Twilight Zone episode. Out of all the chaos and negativity did come the iconic image of the fist bump in the air and the fight, fight, fight. That's become a very iconic image, not just to Trump's campaign, but as a moment in history. That's the moment that everyone will remember. The Secret Service agents dragging Trump away, Trump defiantly looking back, blood strewn across his face, fist in the air and the American flag in the background. That is a very iconic and powerful image, and that's the one image of this event that's going to go down in history. Whenever anyone looks up 13th of July 2024 assassination attempt, that's going to be the image that pops up. The importance of that image, not just as a symbol to Trump and the Republicans, but as one of defiance and this strong, now bulletproof leader, can't be overlooked. Trump and Biden are polar opposites. They're roughly the same age. If that was Biden in Trump's position, I think the outcome would have been very different. Biden is old and frail versus Trump, who is strong, defiant, and now bulletproof. Maybe the hair and the fake tan had something to do with him being bulletproof. Who knows? In those few short weeks, we've gone from Trump versus Biden to Trump not being able to put a foot wrong to Trump versus Kamala. And we've gone back to the black versus white. Gee, I didn't see that one coming. It also seems very desperate from the left to nominate her. I mean, is there nobody else they could put up? Or is this literally trying to bait another fight between Republicans and Democrats? It's not just Republican versus Democrat now. It's black versus white, male versus female, wrong versus right, guilty versus innocent, prosecutor versus prosecuted. Kamala has called herself the prosecutor who's going to prosecute the criminal Trump, even though his court issues are behind him and most of that shit's been chucked out, I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on it. They're just recycling old ideas to throw at Trump. It didn't work the first time around, yet they think they're going to have a better chance of it working with Kamala, which I think is just absolute lunacy. She's got her own problems. I think she's fucking crazy. What did Michael Malice call her? America's wine mum. Some of the things she says are fucking idiotic and completely moronic. I find it hard to believe that someone of her standing talks like that. And what I'm referring to is some of those ridiculous speeches she has given in the past where she laughs maniacally and says some of the most dopiest, retarded shit I've ever heard. Ukraine is a country in Europe. Russia is a country also in Europe. Russia is a large country. Russia invaded Ukraine without warning. Or my personal favourite, today is today. Tomorrow is today, tomorrow. But hey, this is 2024 and stranger things have happened. The Olympics is on at time of recording. I haven't taken much notice of it. I only found out last week about that horrific abomination of an opening ceremony. One of the four horsemen of the apocalypse apparently made an appearance. The truly disturbing and misguided opening ceremony of the Last Supper. I'm not overly religious, but even I think this is blasphemy. With a fat blue dude on a plate dressed like a fucking Smurf, and all the other woke transgender characters they've inserted in there for who knows what fucking reason. I thought this was the Olympics, not the Pride Parade. It seemed a little too arty for the Olympics, and apparently the guy that was behind it is a arty wanker of some type, which makes you wonder why the fuck someone like that would be chosen to come up with a concept for the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. Now, personally, I don't think the Olympics have much relevance in the modern world. I think they've run their course. The last time they were good was about 20 years ago. I think they're about done. I like how they virtue signal and pretend they're doing everything environmentally friendly. Apparently they didn't even have air conditioners in the dorms. The athletes had to bring their own, and they didn't serve meat, or they ran out of meat, and the athletes were complaining, saying, no, we actually need a more of a meat-based diet if we want to perform. They always bow to chop pressure from China for doping time after time. Nothing's ever done about them. They try to cut down the carbon footprint, but yet it costs billions of dollars to put the Olympics on, and then they go ahead and yet they have athletes swimming in a polluted river where they'll probably end up getting Ebola in the coming weeks, or some type of infection not seen since the medieval days. All the Olympics does now is manage to bankrupt whatever city is unfortunate enough to host it. The absurd amount of money spent on the Olympics in the modern day is just unbelievable, where there's more important things happening that could use the money. All the stadiums have to be done up, the transport and all this other shit, and all for a 2-week event that is full of product placement and corporate branding, such as Nike, Powerade, and whatever other corporate sponsor wants to throw money at it. It's fucking hypocritical, and it's become a woke joke. Olympic rant over, let's get back to Trump. So just after the trial and all that court shit had been dropped against Trump, Camilla is calling herself the prosecutor and Trump the criminal. So they're now rehashing this old idea that Trump is a villainous character in need of prosecution from the just and virtuous Kamala. There's probably been about 2 presidents in history that haven't done something dodgy in their past or in office. I'd go out on a limb and say most people in politics are probably pretty dodgy or have done something dodgy in their past. They're humans after all. They're not that just and virtuous. They're just as corrupt and morally flawed as the rest of us scum that need them to lead us because we're too fucking stupid or lazy to do it ourselves. And that's what really pisses me off about the Democrats, Kamala in particular, is the moral virtuousness that she has placed upon herself. She's judge, jury, and executioner, and Trump is just a common criminal. Now, to my knowledge, Trump hasn't done anything that any other president hasn't done before. The porn star hush money, is it really that bad? I mean, don't most important people or presidents, CEOs or mega businesses make some type of hush money payment at some point? He's been charged with misdemeanor offences which aren't worth jail time. And if he went to jail, he'd be one of the first people to go to jail for that particular misdemeanor. So it seems kind of ridiculous, and it looks like a witch hunt and backs up the conspiracies theories that the left want to silence Trump by any means necessary. First there was the secret documents at Mar-a-Lago, porn star hush money payment, the July 6th bullshit, and now this. And Hillary Clinton made hush money payments which were like twice as much as Trump did. I'm not too sure on the details, so don't quote me on it, but apparently she made a large hush money payment to a staff member to keep their mouth shut about Bill and Monica Lewinsky's activities in the Oval Office and their affair. She didn't get dragged over the coals, but Trump did. Every president has done something dodgy. I mean, just look at the last couple. I heard somewhere months ago that Biden apparently took secret documents home in his car. He forgot they were there and left them in the driveway in the backseat of his convertible, which he forgot to lock over the weekend. Is that worse than, or allegedly, what Trump did? Obama drone struck a wedding to kill 1 terrorist and ended up killing 90 innocent people, most of which were children. Bill Clinton allegedly bombed targets overseas to take the attention off of him getting head in the Oval Office. But yet when Trump plays off a porn star, it gets turned into this massive fucking witch hunt. And that is the worst crime in the history of all that is good and holy.
G'day. Don't skip. Let me interrupt the podcast that you're currently listening to with some blatant self-promotion. What do you get when you mix 2 Aussie mates, a splash of booze, well, more than a splash, and some microphones? You get Cheers Big Ears, hosted by myself, the Chad, and my mate, Matt, and sometimes, but more often than not now, my missus, Bobby. It's a podcast of adult beverages and not-so-adult conversation. It's not serious, far from it. Well, except for that one episode, but that was just that one. We're available wherever you get your podcast fix. Cheers, Big Ears.
And that brings us to the end of part 1. We'll pick that up in part 2 of the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. Part 2 has been recorded and edited already, and that will be available in the next 2 weeks or so. But until then, if you'd like to support the Truth Tank, there's a couple of things you can do. Head on over to the Facebook and Instagram page, give them a follow and a like. You can download your favourite episodes on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music if it's still around. Might still be available on Podbean, iHeartRadio, Pandora, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell people who you think might like the show. Help spread the word and get the Truth Tank out there. If you feel so inclined and you're enjoying the show, why not leave a 5-star rating and review? It helps the show grow and rise through the ranks. And I'll be back in the next couple of weeks with a brand new episode. But until then, I'm the Tank. This is the Truth. May the truth be with you.
Assassination.